This show is brought to you by you. Yes, you, the listener. Thank you so much for listening to us, and thank you for all the patrons that support our Battlefield adventure. Wait for the middle of the show to know more about our Patreon, or just go to patreon.com/TheLankySoldier. Enjoy the show. Ladies and gentlemen, swellers and casuals, welcome to BattlefieldOne Podcast, the only podcast on Spotify about Battlefield that actually you need to listen, because we're the best. We're the best Battlefield podcast out there, because Battlefield's not doing great these days. So yeah, we're the best, because the way we talk about Battlefield is educational, interesting, entertaining. So yeah, so if you're new here, do follow us on Spotify, wherever platform you're listening. Give us a rating. It does help other people to find the podcast, all that kind of stuff. It does help, so leave us a rating, all that kind of stuff, and yeah, be involved. So my name is Tom, also known as the Lanky Soldier, and today is going to be a very casual episode. As you can tell, I'm by myself today, and that's mostly because I'm recording this in the middle of the day. Oh, sorry for the burp. Ray is not available for the recording because it's early morning for him, time zones. So, and the podcast needs to be recorded. For this money needs to be recorded. So, I decided, you know what? I'm just gonna sit down, have a little casual podcast, talk about the patron changes we've been doing, talk about Battlefield a little bit, about some news and all that kind of stuff, and just maybe talk about the podcast a little bit, how everything's going, our future plans and ideas, and so on. And yeah, and also I played Battlefield 1 recently. So I kind of want to talk about that a little bit, just to go down memory lane. Is Battlefield 1 still the best Battlefield game out there? Depends how you look at it. But yeah, I was just thinking going through each Battlefield game and just see how they aged. Did they age well? Did they not? And so on. How they look visually, how they mechanically work, and all that kind of stuff. For example, we did one about a retrospective about Bad Company 2 back in between New Year's, it's somewhere during. So it was I can't remember which episode was it, episode 11 maybe 12. I can't remember, one of those episodes. You can find it. But yeah, not much has been happening in Battlefield, and I'm kind of glad because it lets me go through other games like Call of Duty Warzone, Delta Force, or Black Ops 6 these days. Black Ops 6 beta is happening right now, and let me tell you, I'm not a fan of Black Ops 6 beta. It's that game reminds me why I don't like Black Ops games. Warzone, yeah, I love Warzone. Black Ops 6, just Black Ops in general, I don't know. It's just something about those games I just do not like. Delta Force, I'm kind of surprised at all the positive feedback that it's been getting, so that's going to be an interesting thing to look at. So we'll keep an eye on that. I played the alpha. I played the alpha a lot. And yeah, I think it's a really good game. And actually, you should go on Patreon now, where we talked about Delta Force. It's quite good conversations. And also in other news, EA CEO Andrew Wilson opened his mouth again during an investor call and telling shareholders what they want to hear. Them sweet little lies, how much money we're gonna make, how everything is great and everything. Our franchises are doing fantastically. Look at the next Battlefield game that we're doing. It's fucking amazing, and so on, corporate speak. So we're gonna go through that. I mean, not much to talk about there, but still a nice, interesting conversation topic, I guess. But yeah, before we continue with any of that, I just, like I said, leave a rating, for people to discover the podcast. We have time codes, so I understand if you don't want to listen to the whole thing, we have time codes, use it, to make your listening experience much better. We have a Google Forms document in the description if you want to give us feedback. So I understand not everyone has social media, not everyone has an email. Well, you probably have an email, but you don't want to send an email because, where is this, 2000, early 2000s or whatever? I get that. We're all Gen Z and all that kind of stuff, no boomers, even though I'm 30. Yeah, use that Google Forms document. So if you want to give us feedback, negative, positive, just go in the description. wherever you listen to this podcast. It's in the description. Just give us feedback. Just start writing and send. That's it. You don't even need a Google account. It's that easy. It's like the most easiest way to give us feedback. You want to send us insults, compliments, whatever. It's fine. You can do that. So yeah, use a Google Forms document to give us any feedback you want or topic ideas. Topic ideas, all that kind of stuff. Yeah, and me and Ray for the next episode we can go through that. And we have a Patreon. Even though you heard an ad at the beginning, if you're listening this on Patreon, you did not hear that ad. But if you're listening this on Spotify or wherever or anywhere else, you heard an ad about the Patreon. So, but I want to talk about a little bit of Patreon because it's important. Because at the end of the day, this is what low-key pays the bills for us regarding this podcast. And yeah, so I'm gonna talk about the Patreon. So we opened the Patreon maybe like a year and 4 months ago, and when I opened the Patreon, I promised everyone that I will do a 1-year review and do any necessary changes if needed. And a year and 4 months later, we did that. So we did some important changes to Patreon because we analyzed, we gathered feedback and everything, how everything works with Patreon, what makes easier for people to listen about Patreon and all that kind of stuff. And yeah, Patreon is... Well, the new change is already up. Well, I'll tell you why. I realized, and a lot of people realized, that Patreon was, in the last year, was a bit confusing. And when I say confusing, it was a bit... We had too many tiers. We had gold, we had silver, gold, platinum, and iridescent. And the iridescent tier was a meme one. And the silver was basically early access tier. Then the gold tier was basically the whole main content of the Patreon. Like exclusive podcast, all exclusive videos, all that kind of stuff. And then you have platinum tier, which is basically behind the scenes that kind of stuff, right? So I realized it was a bit too expensive, too confusing with the tiers and everything. And I realized, and me and Ray realized that, hey, we need to make it a bit easier for people to understand what tiers do what. And we realized that because every subscriber is important to us for obvious reasons, because you're paying money to watch our exclusive podcast, get early access, support us, all that kind of stuff. So we realized that there's no point in having tiers and everything. So we decided to remove the number of tiers. We made it from 4 to 2. So no matter what tier you subscribe, you're getting the main content. You're gonna get all the content that you want and wish, basically, all the content we make. So silver tier was basically early access. Well, we combined it with another tier. So now we have the supported tier and the enthusiast tier. The supported tier basically gives you all the Patreon content that was available on Patreon, at $4. Just make it cheaper. We made it cheaper. And we combined the platinum tier and everything else into the support and the enthusiast tier. So we just made it easier. That's the point of the Patreon. We realized the Patreon was a bit confusing. It was not that good to listen for everyone, and it was the idea was to people want to support, but they don't want to financially fully support the Patreon because money these days is very hard to obtain. We live in really interesting economic times, and I understand that everyone can spend $5 a month or whatever. It did not seem a lot. But I understand some people are counting pennies, but they still want to support because they enjoy the show and so on. I get that. So we made the Patreon cheaper. We made the tiers from 4 to 2. And no matter what tier you subscribe, you can get all the content you want, early access, all that kind of stuff. And anyway, the point is I wrote a really long article explaining the changes. So please go to patreon.com/TheLankySoldier and read those changes by yourself, see how it is, and I hope that I really took a long time to write that article, so please go to that article and read all the changes and consider subscribing because it does pay the bills, regarding the podcast, I for Ray and everything. I mean, at the end of the day, we're still full-time working adults. And everything, a bit of extra help does help us to, maybe skip a day or work or whatever, just to do the podcast and whatever the case may be, or do exclusive Patreon stuff, all that kind of stuff. It does help. So, and we also have a free trial. So if you don't want to if you're not sure about the content we're making, you can always use the free trial for a little bit and then cancel it. It's up for a week. If you're willing to listen to all 40, 50 episodes on Patreon in a week, sure, have at it, my dude, and they're like an hour each. Have fun with that. I mean, if you can do it, I will not judge you. But yeah, we did some Patreon changes and all that kind of stuff, and I'm really happy how the changes are like how they look right now. I'm really happy how the Patreon looks right now, and I'm really satisfied with everything. And of course, I'm gonna do the same 1-year review next year, see how it goes, and maybe do any more necessary changes if needed. But yeah, for example, I want to talk about the last podcast we did with Westy, BattlefieldOne podcast. I had an interview with Westy on the last episode, and let me tell you right now, we had an amazing episode. So if you're new to this podcast and you're listening to this now, and you haven't listened to that last episode, let me tell you, this is one of the best episodes we ever did, because Westy was professional, he was on time and everything, and the recording was so easy, the conversations were easy and everything. It was just amazing. Oh, sorry for burping. I literally had food before I was recording, so I'm sorry about that. And my throat is kind of feels funny. Anyway, that's the joys of hosting the podcast by yourself. So we had Westy on, and of course we had some behind the scenes stuff posted on Patreon with Westy, so feel free to subscribe and look at that. Yeah, so we had Westy on. It was the most amazing recording session I have had when it comes to BattlefieldOne podcast, because like I said, he was professional, he was on time, the conversations went nicely and everything, and he's a Battlefield OG. I know him since almost for a decade. I mean, in some shape or form, we know each other for almost a decade. We're not best friends or anything, don't get me wrong, we're not buddies, but we people that know each other in the Battlefield sphere, and I'm so glad he came on the podcast. I invited him saying, listen, you want to talk about Battlefield? He's like, yeah, sure. He had no reason to come on the podcast. He had no reason, because he does Call of Duty right now, or first-person shooters and everything. He also has almost has 1 million subscribers on YouTube. He has other things to worry about than coming on the podcast and talk about Battlefield for an hour. He has no reason to come, and talk about it. But he was excited, just someone invited him to talk about Battlefield, because no one does any Battlefield content these days, because the way Battlefield is right now. And I love having Westy on the podcast. It was such an amazing experience, and the conversations we had were really, really, really good. And because we had really good conversations with Westy on the last episode, I want to promote that episode, on the Battlefield subreddit or whatever. Like, here's my problem. I decided to promote on the Battlefield subreddit. That's your biggest problem. So, and try to promote it. Like, hey, we had Westy. We had some amazing conversations. A lot of people know who he is and so on. And that was a mistake. I started promoting our podcast on the subreddit, and I basically got shot on. Like, oh, Westy, he haven't posted a Battlefield video for 2-3 years. Jack Frogs and Broken Machine still play Battlefield, and they still play Battlefield 1 and other Battlefield games and so on. I'm like, okay, listen here, little shits. I'm sorry, but not the best way to promote. But the comments I got on that post where I was promoting the podcast, the comments I got was so naive. So I am so sorry if you hear the disqualification. The comments I got in that were so naive, so narrow-minded. Like, oh, who the fuck is Westy? He plays only Call of Duty and so on. When's the last time he did a Battlefield video? My dudes, me, Westy, Checkfrax, and all other big YouTubers you probably know in the Battlefield sphere in some shape or form, we were there when the Battlefield legends were written. We were there when the Battlefield Bible was written. We were there with Battlefield 3, with Battlefield 4, Battlefield 1, Battlefield Hardline, for fuck's sake, Battlefield 5 and Battlefield 2042. We've been there. We know Battlefield in and out. We might not agree with everything about Battlefield for obvious reasons, because everyone has different opinions for obvious reasons, because we're all human. But we all want the same thing, basically. We want Battlefield to be a really good game, a good franchise, and we always angry at this franchise because we always think that Battlefield can do better. Battlefield can do better. The resources they have, the technology they have, the talent they have, and everything. They have everything to be world beaters. I've been saying that since Battlefield 4. Since we saw the skyscraper going down in Siege of Shanghai, or when we played Battlefield 3 for the first time, or when we played Battlefield 1. Like, games are different, but they still have, like, they had that talent behind them. What's the word I'm looking for? Ambition to be more amazing games. Yeah, you might say, like, oh, it's not competing with Call of Duty, but the point is, it doesn't supposed to compete with Call of Duty. Call of Duty is in its own thing. It's like, it doesn't matter what Call of Duty does, they will be fine. It's Battlefield is. We always angry about Battlefield because we always know that Battlefield can do better. And so when people say, like, oh, who the fuck is Westy? Fuck that guy, whatever. Oh, Westy is a douchebag. Anyway, I'm sorry, what is this? 2014, 13? Some people still live in those times where they still think there's some sort of divide between franchise and player base and so on. Oh, you're a cooler dude. Like, especially Battlefield community. Battlefield community is so narrow-minded. Like, I don't even know sometimes why I host a Battlefield podcast. Maybe because I want to make a change. I want to believe that I'm making a positive change when it comes to Battlefield community and Battlefield franchise in general. That's why I host this podcast. In all honesty, I should not host this podcast because what Battlefield is doing right now is not worth it. But like everyone else, we believe Battlefield can do something good and be amazing and so on. So hearing comments like, oh, who the fuck is Westy? Like, my dudes, he's the OG. He's like me. He's the OG. He knows Battlefield in and out. He knows. So just because these people going like, they refuse to listen to the podcast just because Westy was in, because he doesn't do Battlefield anymore. So I don't do Battlefield. I haven't played Battlefield 2042 since, April? And it's September now? I haven't played Battlefield 2042 for so long, and I don't think I will ever play it because I did a live stream once. I literally said, this is the last time I played Battlefield 2042, and I made a video this is the last time I played Battlefield 2042. It's an amazing video, by the way. You should go on my YouTube, like the Lanky Soldier, and watch it yourself. It's an amazing video, amazing live stream I did. And I still know a lot of things about Battlefield. I still know what Battlefield stands for. I know what Battlefield needs to... Well, I can't say I know everything that Battlefield needs to do. But Battlefield community is so narrow-minded when it comes to, just inviting people. Or just giving different opinions about everything. Like, oh, you haven't played Battlefield for a while, so that means he has no say. Fuck that guy. Really? Really? You really gonna... Battlefield community, I remember I was part of that gatekeeping community back in the day. I do remember. Like, when I was young, I played Battlefield a lot, and I was part of that gatekeeping community. But as I grew up, I realized, it's a stupid way to look at video games. In that way. I realized it's stupid. It's stupid. It's not. The reason why I rebooted this Battlefield 1 podcast is because I realized, listen, it's video games. We want people to enjoy video games. And we want people to enjoy Battlefield. And we want to have discussions about Battlefield that are interesting, entertaining, and all that kind of stuff. So hearing the Battlefield community just being very narrow-minded about someone being on the podcast because they haven't played Battlefield for a while and they haven't, okay. Sure. Why? They're not that... Also, it's not some random Call of Duty YouTuber, for example. It's a guy that played Battlefield for a really long time. The reason he became big is because of Battlefield. But Battlefield's not doing great these days, so he has to pay the bills. He has a family. You guys know that, right? Like, everyone has lives to live. We have to pay the bills and everything. So of course he has to pay the bills and do something that brings him some sort of income. This is his life. Of course he's gonna switch games if he has to. There's nothing wrong with that. It's tolerable. It's normal. And if you're sure, if you're a variety YouTuber and play all the types of first-person shooters and Battlefield happens to be in the mix, sure. But will that person be more qualified than Westy, for example? I mean, depends. I I don't know. Honestly, Westy, like everyone else, we know Battlefield. So anyway, the point what I'm trying to make is that these comments about Westy, that who the fuck is Westy? Why bring him on the podcast and all that kind of stuff? Like, why? He's been there with me. He was there when the Battlefield Bible was being written. He was in the same room, you know. I mean, crap. He played Battlefield 1 early, and all that kind of, like, it just makes me angry. It makes me angry how Battlefield community is so gatekeeping about everything, and that's maybe the Battlefield franchise doesn't want to grow that much. It can't grow because the player base doesn't want anyone in their little bubble. Stop. Live with the modern times. Grow up. I mean, that's my comment. Like, anyway, long story short, the podcast we did, the episode we did with Westy last episode, amazing conversations we had about Battlefield, about the upcoming Battle Royale, Delta Force, in just content creation and everything. It's just amazing podcast. I had such an amazing time recording that podcast. It's just like, I want to do it again. And we'll probably do it again. And I have some other guests listed on that I want to invite, and hopefully they're going to come in the next upcoming weeks or months. So, for example, we had Flagfire on Live Gaming Gathering podcast. So I want to bring him back on Battlefield 1 podcast. So I want to bring him here and talk about Battlefield. So see how it goes. Hey there, I hope you're enjoying the discussion that we're having. Like I said at the start of the episode, I will tell you all about our amazing Patreon that is helping us keeping the show going. Patreon.com/TheLankySoldier.
Some Patreon exclusiveness. We here at Patreon would love for
You sound like every nerd in all the 90s TV shows.
By becoming a patron, you're not only supporting the show, but you're also getting a lot of content back. First up, you'll get ad-free early access to all our future episodes. You can already listen to our previous episodes ad-free by just joining the Patreon for free. That's right, no more waiting, no more interruptions, just pure, unfiltered Battlefield content straight to your ears before anyone else gets to hear it. Well, of course, that's not all. We're also giving you a behind-the-scenes look at what goes into making Battlefield 1 podcast and other shows we make, from planning sessions to recording mishaps, and everything in between. You'll get an insider's perspective on how we bring each episode to life. And the reason why I'm saying
I'm sorry.
Yeah, it's your fault.
It's all my fault.
It's all your fucking fault, Ray. How did you ruined the whole show? We need to cancel it again.
Just gotta fucking can it for another 8 months again. Just appear out of nowhere with
we need to cancel it again.
Colors.
Ray, what the fuck did you do? And for those of you craving even more content, we got you covered with extra videos that you won't find anywhere on my main channel. And for our gold tier supporters, the main tier at our Patreon, we're offering access to our exclusive podcast series Live Gaming Gathering Extra, or LGG Extra for short. This is a show where my friends and I gather together to talk about everything from the video game industry to movies or anything that is on our minds. With more than 30 episodes already available, there's hours and hours of content for you to listen. Trust me, they are some of the most fun and amazing conversations we ever had, because it's just being us, relaxed and actually having fun.
Alright, I think we need to move on because we've been kind of on this subject for about the last 15 minutes now.
Yeah.
We got a couple of things in order.
Are you feeling better now? Let this
Yes,
team off?
I do feel better. Oh no, wait, one more thing. For example, Angelo.
Okay.
We were in
I'm
discussion.
not gonna mention any names.
And trust me, you won't want to miss anything we discuss in the future. But wait, there's more. We also have another early access and ad-free show about Call of Duty called Lockdown Player. So if you're a fan of multiple franchises, we got something for you too. And of course, I believe in keeping our patrons informed. I also post monthly updates to let you know what you expect in the upcoming month, so we'll know what you expect in the future if you're not sure about the content we're posting. And because we're confident that you'll love the content we're creating, we offer a free trial that you can use anytime. We believe that we're making good content that will make you stay in the long run, and I will not be offering a free trial if I do not believe that. Battlefield 1 podcast was rebooted back in March 2023. We learned a lot of lessons from our previous shows that consisted of 41 episodes, and we've been building an amazing foundation for the future of this current show. There's a reason why we're the only Battlefield-related podcast available on Spotify, and we had the honor being listened to by DICE developers themselves, and now we want to share even more with you through our Patreon. So if you want to support the show and get all these amazing extras, head over to patreon.com/TheLankySoldier. Your support means the world to us and helps us keep delivering the content you love. Thank you for being part of our Battlefield community, and we look forward to seeing you on our Patreon. Now, let's go back to the show. But yeah, other than that, let's talk some news, I guess. So, I have some notes here because nothing's been happening in Battlefield franchise these days. So, of course, Battlefield 3, Battlefield 4, Battlefield Hardline are not available to purchase on all generation consoles anymore. With Xbox 360 store itself is already got shut down back in July, if I remember correctly. So yeah, not big news, whatever. But I do have a lot of nostalgia regarding Battlefield 3 and Battlefield 4 on PlayStation 3. You know, I used to play a lot of Battlefield 3 on PlayStation 3, and I had so much fucking fun. It just changed my life forever. Battlefield 3 was the reason why I want to be better at video games, especially in first-person shooters, because before Battlefield 3, I was shit at first-person shooters. I was absolute dog shit. And Battlefield 3 made me, get better. Get good. Because like, wow, this game is fun and everything. I want to get good. I actually want to play good and so on. It's like, it was a mentality like, yeah, I want to play good because Battlefield 3 is so fucking awesome. Then Battlefield 4 on all generation consoles. I made a video about Battlefield being on all generation consoles. Like, people complain, oh, graphics look like shit. There's only 24 players on all generation consoles and so on. Like, Siege in Shanghai with 24 players and 3 flags. That's so boring and all that kind of stuff. And I made a video about that. You know what? Battlefield doesn't need to go big all the time. Battlefield doesn't need to go, bombastic every freaking time with 64 players or 128 players and everything. I'm like, the best times I had in Battlefield games were not 64, 128 player massacres. The best times I had in Battlefield were much smaller battlefields, much smaller experiences. For example, I was participating in a lot of competitive events for Battlefield 4, and we had 8-on-8, 24 players, whatever the case may be, whatever the number is, but it was never above 24 on the server. And it was awesome. The best Battlefield experience, the Battlefield usually is not about it's about chaos and everything, I get that. A lot of people go for that. But chaos can be created in a smaller scale too, and it can be really fun and so on. And a perfect example, for example, I was talking to West on the last episode, like, for example, yeah, we do Battle Royale and so on for the next game, sure, that's fine. But I would love them to do like a competitive Battlefield, like 5-on-5 competitive, because back in Battlefield 1, which I'm going to speak about Battlefield 1 in a moment, back in Battlefield 1, we had alpha thing called Battlefield 1 Incursions. And Battlefield 1 Incursions was basically an attempt by DICE to make Battlefield competitive. So it was 5-on-5, specifically a mode designed for competitive Battlefield. It had destruction, it had vehicles, it had a map design especially for that game mode. The game mode was specifically designed for that, competitive stuff. It had classes and everything. It was Battlefield. And to this day, you can't play that anymore, unfortunately. But Battlefield 1 Incursions was the best Battlefield experience, one of the best Battlefield experiences I've ever had when it comes to Battlefield franchise. Because, yeah, it was only 10 players on the server, but God, it was so intense and so exciting and so Battlefield. There was extraction, classes, like moments and close games and everything. That was the Battlefield, the Battlefield chaos in a small form, and that was amazing. So when I look at Battlefield 3 and Battlefield 4 and even Hardline, on generation consoles, like with 24 players and all that kind of stuff, shitty graphics and so on, people might judge that, but sometimes it was the best Battlefield experience ever. Battlefield 3 on Battlefield 4, for example, Battlefield 3 on PlayStation 3 was a much better experience than Battlefield 3 on PC. It was. It's just, unapologetically, it was. It's not even an opinion, it's a fact. Sign Crossing, anyone remember Sign Crossing from Battlefield 3? Good map on Battlefield 3 on PS3 version. PC, horrible. 64 player, was it? How many flags they had? Like, I think it had 6 flags. Yeah, I think two on the side, 5 or 6, I can't remember. But basically, the map was divided in with with a crossing, right? With a river, a canal, whatever you want to call it. And that basically made the whole map unplayable because everyone's just shooting from other side of the river to another. Like, it's just like you can't cross, you can't capture flag and everything. It was a horrible map. But on Battlefield 3 on PS3 with 24 players, the river or the canal is not in play. You have 4 flags, evenly distributed, and it was amazing. Amazing. Each team had a tank on their side. It was an amazing Battlefield experience because it just worked so much better. The gameplay wise, it worked so much better. I'm just like, can we have this more often? Because at that point I realized, wow, 64 players is not the answer to Battlefield being good, or 128 players like Battlefield 2042. Battlefield 3 and Sign Crossing was chef's kiss. It was amazing. And there's some other examples that make certain maps so much better just because they're smaller scale. And when the gameplay is on point, you don't really care about graphics anymore. Yeah, it's nice to look at pretty graphics once in a while and so on, but if the gameplay is not there, and besides, when the gameplay is really fun and so on, you kind of stop noticing the graphics. You kind of stop noticing, and it's just like you just play the game. The gameplay is number one thing that keeps games entertaining. Graphics don't do anything. Yeah, it's nice to look at pretty asset, like a pretty 4K asset, in front of your screen, but if the game itself is shit, I don't care. So yeah, you cannot play, well, you can if you own those games, but you cannot buy Battlefield 3, Battlefield 4, and Hardline on all generation consoles anymore because they just got shut down. It's more than a decade and so on. It's kind of sad, but I have a lot of nostalgia and will remember those good times for a really long time. Right, anyway, so minus that. Other news, actually I need to have a sip quickly. That you're yourself hosting the podcast by yourself. Battlefield 1 is getting EA anti-cheat. So EA has been working on their own anti-cheat, which I'm really glad. And they basically already applied that anti-cheat to Battlefield 2042. They already applied to Battlefield 25. And they just they're gonna apply this month EA their own anti-cheat to Battlefield 1. That's fantastic. I'm kinda glad they're going back to their old games and applying anti-cheat to those games. That's fantastic. I love that. And it's amazing that they're doing that, and nice to know that we're gonna have some sort of decent, don't get me wrong, you can never remove cheaters from the game because it's a mouse and cat and mouse game. It's always an ongoing battle. But just the fact they're going back to their old games and applying that anti-cheat, they have no reason to apply that anti-cheat to old games. They have no reason to apply it to Battlefield 1. And now I'm wondering if they're gonna do it to Battlefield 4, and maybe they don't. I don't think they will though, just because the way Battlefield 4 works is so different from Battlefield 1, because you can you can control your own server, admins, and so on. So it's a bit different experience. Because Battlefield 1 is all first party, so EA is responsible for everything, the servers and everything. So I think that's why they need the anti-cheat. But I'm so glad they're actually doing that, and looking forward to that anti-cheat being available in the next game, in the future Battlefield game, Battle Royale and all that kind of stuff. It's like, yeah, I'm glad they're doing that, and they may be probably doing some testing, see what works, what doesn't, and so on, and that's great. Secure games, that's fantastic. I have to give props to EA to that. So applying EA anti-cheat, or whatever it's called, to their old games, fantastic. So speaking of Battlefield 1, I played Battlefield 1 recently. Well, recently, like a month ago, because there's a live stream of me playing Battlefield 1, so please go to my channel, Lanky Soldier, TheLankySoldier, and Battlefield 1 to this day visually still looks amazing. Still a very nice looking game. I remember I was not a fan of the controls back in 2016 when the game came out. I was not a fan of the controls. It's not perfect, but it's fine. You kind of need to get used to and that kind of stuff. And when I played Battlefield 1, it made me realize that how many small things we never had back then that we have right now. So when you play Battlefield 1, a game that was made in 2016, right? The release 2016. You play the game and you realized, oh, you can't really reload while you're ADS, or you can't really do certain things like that you can do in modern games. Just the small things quality life stuff that we used to right now in all first-person shooters, it's not in Battlefield 1. And that's gonna get a little bit like, oh wow, this clearly did not age well. And it's quite amazing to think about, like, oh wow, we never had that, and how? You would imagine 2016, like, still consider, probably a lot of people still consider Battlefield 1 one of the best Battlefields out there, even though I think Battlefield 3 or Battlefield 4 is there. Battlefield 1 it's still a visually good looking game. I remember the maps being bigger, but they're actually quite small. And then and as I was going through the old Battlefield podcast of mine that we hosted back in the day, we talked about Battlefield 1 and everything. Yeah, I remember not being a fan of Battlefield 1 maps for many reasons, because I think they were not that good. And as I played Battlefield 1 again, yeah, I don't think they're good. I really don't think they're good. Like, they do their own purpose, because the philosophy they went with Battlefield 1, I think, well, that's on purpose why they went with that philosophy, is it's like big map, right? Like, you have your 64 players, but the map was really like designed to be like, oh, really big at the first, but when you push in towards the other flags, you push towards the enemy flags or whatever, like in the middle of the maps get narrow, and I think the reason is to design this, like, sell this idea that, hey, this is World War One, this is there's front lines and everything, you can't just flank and everything. You could not do that, because it's just like you will get shot. So I think, and because it's an arcade, it's not really a representation of how World War One went and everything. Of course not. It's arcade first person shooter. But just the fact that, like, when you spawn in your base, the map is huge, right? But as you go forward, push towards the flag, the middle flag and so on, the map gets narrow, and that's all the players, both teams meet, they start to shoot each other, there's barely any flanking routes and everything, you need to use a bloody tank and be a little bitch and take all the damage, and hopefully your teammates can push and capture the flag. So that was the idea. I understand why they went with kind of map design philosophy. Fully understand that. I get it. It's World War One. We kind of need to create this immersion and everything. So when it comes to immersion, Battlefield 1 is quite immersive, even to this day. Like 8 years, well, almost 9 years, 8 years later, Battlefield 1 is still a very immersive experience. You can hear the soldiers screaming and all that kind of stuff, the gunshots, the sound effects and everything, the presentation of the game, the music, all that stuff. It's immersive. The presentation's on point. It's like, yeah, this is a game with an ambition, with a message, with a specific art style, specific design idea, what it wants to sell. So that's why, like, when I review games, for example, a lot of first-person shooters, I always look the way I look at Battlefield 1. I always look, hey, what this game is trying to sell, what this game is trying to tell me, what's the idea behind this game. For example, the reason I was kind of worried about Delta Force, for example, that, like my friend Ray said, it might be like a splash in the pan moment for this game, Delta Force, because I was just looking at the game and everything, like, yeah, it's a good game, but what does it offer bigger than that? What's the idea? What's the plan? What's the ambition here? Why are you trying to tell me here? Like, yeah, it's a good first-person shooter, but what else you try? Like, what's the idea? Like, what's the immersion idea? What's the message and all that kind of stuff, right? And that's how I look at video games. It's because it's a piece of art. Delta Force to me is like a very generic shooter, but it's a very good shooter, which is nice. But I always worry that it might not have the staying power that people might think you have. So we'll see. But Battlefield 1 definitely makes people remember how immersive and how amazing Battlefield 1 was. Even though when the Battlefield 1 came out back in the day, I was hosting Battlefield 1 podcast back then, like the original podcast show. And me and Wesley were talking about it last episode. And me and Ray actually talked about it loads of time. It was a lot, especially Ray. Ray can talk about Battlefield 1 a lot. It was missing a lot of features that we got used to in Battlefield 4, for example. Battlefield 1 was like, I always thought it was gonna be like, yeah, it's like it's not a reboot, but it's like a sidestep to the franchise. Like, we want to do this side thing, and maybe build from there. So, it's not a reboot or whatever. It's a side thing. It's a sidestep. And from that sidestep, we can just try to build on, see what we can do in the future. Then Battlefield 5 came out. It was a completely different story. But yeah, Battlefield 1, I love the presentation. I love the atmosphere and everything. But yeah, I never really liked Battlefield 1 for the level design, because it just forces you into tunnels, but I understand why they did that, because it was World War 1. I get that. Atmosphere is still amazing to this day. Although, Conquest was horrible. Conquest in Battlefield 1 was really horrible for this reason, because the scoring system is shit. It's very fake, very artificial. Because, for example, I don't know if people realize that, but I remember I made a video. I know you can find the video on my YouTube channel. Like, I don't know how old is that. Like, it's a really old video, but you can find it. And I think it's called Battlefield 1 Conquest is Broken or something like that. And I basically showcased in that video how Conquest is so broken in Battlefield 1. Because even you might not be having the majority of the control of the flags for the majority of the match. Like, let's say there's 5 flags on the map. Enemy controls 3 flags, and you control 2 flags. You still can win the game just fine by controlling 2 flags. Under no circumstances that should be a thing. But the way the scoring works, and the way, it was calculated, it was created to present this idea like, oh, the games are very close and so on, like, oh, teams fought well and so on. No. It was not. It was just created to create this illusion that the games are very close, but they're not. And it was really frustrating when you're playing really, really good and you still lose. Just because the game said, no, we have to give this other team a chance. I'm sorry, no. That's manipulation, which is much worse than skill-based matchmaking in Call of Duty. I'm sorry. At least skill-based matchmaking might not be perfect, but it doesn't manipulate games. At least not in that way. Like, if you're good enough, you'll win. If you're not, well, sorry. We'll give you a little, kind of lesser opponents. In here, doesn't matter how good or bad you are. No. This was designed to be some sort of keep teams in close no matter what. It was really weird. It did not. I remember that in Battlefield 1 CT, they kind of tried to change it. They tried to change the system. And I remember I played on that server where we had a normal scoring system, but I don't know why they never went with it. Something did not work. I don't remember what was the excuse, what was the problem, but they never went with it, which is kind of unfortunate. But yeah, Battlefield 1 scoring system in Conquest was so freaking bad. I don't want to experience it ever again in my life. It's so bad. It's just I'll take skill-based matchmaking in Call of Duty any day over whatever this abomination was. And I remember when I was at the Battlefield 1 reveal event, and I went to the reveal event and then the LA event to record footage. When I went to Battlefield 1 recording, EA Play, what was it, the event? When I went to record, and we played Battlefield 1 Alpha behind closed doors, then I remember I went to the lead developer and said, listen, the Battlefield 1 Conquest is not good. It's just not. It doesn't look, it doesn't work well. It's just that I got some explanation why they did it. I get that, but I really do not like that system. I never liked it, and I don't know if Battlefield 5 had the same system though. Actually, I didn't even know how Conquest scoring system works in Battlefield 2042. I don't know if it works the same way. I don't think it does. But no one really cared about Battlefield 2042 that much. No one really paid attention to it. I kind of wanted to see it, actually. So, yeah. Battlefield 1 Conquest scoring system was so bad. I don't want to do that ever again. But yeah, Battlefield 1, amazing game. It's just aged kind of well. Visually still looks fantastic. Control-wise, it's alright. Was never a big fan of the maps, but I always treat Battlefield 1 as a, like I said, a sidestep, a little step to the side. Just try to do something different because back then releasing a World War 1 shooter was suicide to a lot of people. And it's quite amazing that Battlefield 1 actually succeeded in a lot of cases. And I'm glad. That's the power of Battlefield if done right. I was not the biggest fan of Battlefield 1, but that's okay. And for people that are new here and still listening, let me tell you, our podcast named Battlefield 1 is not because of this game. We took the name Battlefield 1 like 2 years before Battlefield 1 was announced. So, and then we heard that the game is called Battlefield 1. Oh boy, we got loads of traffic regarding that, so that's for sure. And I remember I was talking to one EA executive in person, like, listen, it's so funny that you guys took the name, because we had a Battlefield 1 podcast, and you guys decided to go with Battlefield 1 for the games. Like, yeah, we checked and nothing was copyrighted and so on. So yeah, like, we had a nice friendly chat. It's funny, but I literally went like, hey, boy, you stole our name. You know that, right? It's just like, it was a funny, friendly conversation. But yeah, it's so funny that we actually, like, no one's gonna name the podcast Battlefield. They're never gonna release a Battlefield game called Battlefield 1. This is not happening. We can call the podcast Battlefield 1. The number one source for Battlefield news and all that kind of stuff, And then 2 years later, Battlefield 1 is announced. Yeah, like, interesting. There's a lot of things that we said and did where actually got applied to Battlefield games. For example, we talked about the attrition system that was in Battlefield 5 like a year or two before the game was announced too, so I don't fucking know. But maybe we always joke that some developers are listening to us and just like, yeah, write it down, that these guys have an idea. Like, okay, God knows, maybe if that's true or not. I don't know. I find that really, really funny. So anyway, let's talk about something else. There's Andrew Wilson's talking points that we can talk about that. So Andrew Wilson had an investors call. Well, there was an investors call and Andrew Wilson was talking. So he mentioned that 25 million players played Battlefield games in the last year. Fascinating number, I'll give you that. He didn't say Battlefield 2042, he said Battlefield games. So that's what the Battlefield franchise is right now. They're looking at the whole franchise as a whole, not as an individual game. I remember when there was an investors call right after Battlefield 2042 came out. I think it was like December or some shit. And they were talking about Battlefield. They, for example, used the Battlefield 5 logo instead of Battlefield 22 logo. And that was like a whole sign like, oh, you really don't want people to know about Battlefield 2042. I don't know if you can hear the seagull in the background. So, yeah, EA tried their best to pretend that Battlefield 2042 did not happen. Did not exist. Listen, I know we have a new game came out like a month ago, but can we use Battlefield 5 logo in the report instead of Battlefield 2042? Just to like something? Which maybe it was a mistake, fuck knows, but it was such an interesting moment. But yeah, so that's what the Battlefield franchise is right now. They focus on the whole franchise. They try to keep the franchise alive because this is it's a clear sign to me, at least. Like, if I was an executive and I want to give this stat, about my franchise, like, hey, we have 25 million players playing Battlefield games. Yeah, in a sense, it's probably true, and I don't think they will be lying about that. Yeah, 25 million players played Battlefield games in the last year. Great. They're probably counting like Battlefield 3, Battlefield 4, Battlefield 1, Battlefield 5, Battlefield 2042, maybe even Hardline. Like, yeah, put together, maybe you do get that number. But that's what the Battlefield franchise is linked. And they're also talking about building a universe and so on and all that kind of stuff. And they've been talking about it since Battlefield 2022 got announced. And that pisses me off because I don't remember if we talked about the Patreon episode or we talked on the Battlefield 1 podcast. But I remember me and Ray were talking about, maybe it was the single player conversation we had. Like, maybe. I think it was episode 3 of Battlefield 1 podcast. But we talked about the Battlefield universe or whatever. I think it was episode 3. I can't remember which episode. It was one of the early ones, but you can check it out. It's one of the best episodes we ever did. We talked about like, how Battlefield needs to build a universe and all that kind of stuff, right? And we've been talking about it since, 2014, 15? Like, we've been talking for a decade at this point about that Battlefield should be doing a Battlefield universe, all that kind of stuff. Not different games, but all connected in some shape or form, and because it just makes sense, because you want Battlefield. That's the thing about Battlefield games. Even though they're different each game, but they're somewhat connected in some shape or form. but in reality they're not really not. And EA finally realizing what Battlefield franchise is, and they're trying to finally build that according to their words. Like from 2 years, the first word of Battlefield Universe one mentioned was from 2 years ago. That was the first time they even mentioned that. I mean, if not even 3 years. That was like after Battlefield 2022. That was the first time they even mentioned the word universe, right? And we talked about for more than a decade. And that pisses me off that you only realize that just now, after the failure of Battlefield 2042, like, hey, we need to build a Battlefield universe. My dude, Call of Duty already has that with Call of Duty Warzone. What have you been doing for the last 5 years, 6 years, 7 years? You know? And it's funny to me. And you should listen to our last, I think it's last, but oh yeah, there was a Patreon episode. Me and Ray were talking about Call of Duty because he played Call of Duty with me for the first time. We played Warzone, and I got his impression like listen, and he literally said like, oh, the things we're talking about, Battlefield needs to do to create this coherent Battlefield universe. Call of Duty already did that, and it's so funny that your competitors did that before Battlefield even had a chance, like even realized they had the golden goose, like they literally had the everything and to do that. And I remember like 2015, 16, I think I wrote an article, a private feedback towards developers about creating the Battlefield universe and all that kind of stuff. I still have it saved somewhere. That was like a decade ago. Yeah, 8 years ago. And they only now realizing, oh, we should build a Battlefield universe. So anyway, another things that Andrew Wilson said about the next Battlefield game, the community is energized by what our teams are doing and excited for what comes next. This is not just one of our top priorities, it's also one of the most ambitious projects in our history. We have brought together the very best team, coupled with the resources and technology they need to deliver an epic Battlefield experience. Translation, it means jack shit. Corporate speak these days mean nothing. And I love the fact that the Battlefield community and people with brains finally catching up to this. Like, oh, this means absolutely nothing. You know, this is just a vomit of words that just say, yeah, we're making another Battlefield game. And it will be amazing. Cool. So that means nothing to us. So I'm glad you have the best teams, but then again we heard ahead of schedule, a love letter to Battlefield fans. We all heard that. We've been there. We've done that. We know. So listening to this, it doesn't matter. Also, a couple of episodes we talked about Andrew Wilson's comments again, where he said it will be a tremendous live service. Obviously, the next game is going to be a live service. Duh. Of course. It will be a live service. No one thought otherwise. If you thought the next game is not going to be a live service, what you been doing for the last 5 years, my dude? I'm sorry, keep up with the times. Keep up with the times. The times are different. Of course it's going to be a live service game. That's not the problem. The problem was how he said it. There was going to be a tremendous live service. Yeah, I understand you said that to the shareholders that have no idea, never played video games. They're just there to make money. Of course. But I mentioned in that episode, hey, Andrew Wilson, you have to realize that a lot of people read these comments outside your shareholders. We also read these statements, and it doesn't give us a lot of confidence about the next Battlefield game for obvious reasons. So I don't know if they will ever realize that, but we'll see. Regarding this quote that he said, sure, top priority, fuck knows. But more interesting thing that happened is there was a Motive Studios job listing. So Motive Studios is part of EA umbrella. So it's a studio that worked on Battlefield. Wait, what they worked on? I remember they recently just worked on Dead Space remake. They worked on Star Wars Battlefront 2 single player. And now I heard, they're making an Iron Man game, I think? Okay, I know that nothing was shown about that, but I know they're making an Iron Man game. And now they're working on the Battlefield single player, together with Criterion Studios. And what pisses me off, because I already mentioned that, they had a studio, what's it called? Ridgeline Studios that was destined to make a Battlefield single player. That was their job. I'm sorry if you hear people talking in the background. I'm sorry. They were destined to make a Battlefield single player. They opened the studio 2 years ago, and was it a couple of months ago, like 7 months ago, they closed the studio without even showing anything about it. And like, yeah, sure, okay. And they gave all the leftover work to Criterion to complete. So keep in mind, I already said this like on that episode. Keep in mind, because there's only a year left, basically, to make the next Battlefield game. I'm telling you right now, the single player for the next game will be crap. It'll be very bare bones, very, very not interesting, and so on. Even back then, I was thinking, like, there was a Modern Warfare 2019 co-op mode and so on. Like, you spawn on the map on Verdansk and you do some missions and just leave and so on. It was like it was not that interesting. And that's what was in my head when I was talking about the closure of Ridgeline Studios. And now this motive job listing that happened, that is also apparently they made a new team just to work on the single player game. I'm like, okay, sure. Like it gets really confusing. And again, they're talking about the Battlefield universe. Again, they keep pumping that into our heads, like, yeah, Battlefield universe. Like, okay, cool. I get it. You really want this thing to be a thing. I get it. Like, you really want this thing to be big. Fine. So anyway, Motive Studios job listing said they're looking for I think it was a level designer or something like that. I can't remember. But because the job listing is not available anymore, they deleted it as soon as people realized that it's gone. It's just like that. It was gone like that as soon as people started reading into that job listing. So as we're recording this, the job listing is not there anymore. It's not active. But I think it was for level design, I think. And it basically said, we're looking for someone to work on the single player Battlefield. And the quote is, EA Motive is building a Battlefield universe across connected multiplayer experiences and single player, bringing their expertise with storyline and experience in open world elements is ideal. And a lot of people start speculating, oh no, the next Battlefield single player is going to be open world and all that kind of stuff and so on. I know how people feel about that, but let me just tell you right now. It said open world elements, like experience with that, will be ideal. So the way I see it, it's exactly how I envisioned when I was talking about the closure of Ridgeline Studios. The next single player is going to be really bare bones, very simple, Modern Warfare 2019 co-op missions type of stuff. I don't know if they're gonna have co-op. Maybe it's not gonna be co-op. Well, God knows, it's probably gonna be a single player. But Battlefield 1 kind of had the same thing. Like, you had a big map, you had 3 objectives, and you have to do all those 3 objectives, and you can do it your own way. Like, any typical open world mission. It was on Sinai Desert. It was big enough to do the missions. Like, Battlefield 1 single player was okay. Nothing special, but it was just whatever, just a nice little time waster. Like, it had some moments in there and there, which is fine. And Battlefield 5 was kind of the same in a sense, but yeah, that's what I think of open world missions. I don't think the next single player is going to be good. I don't think it's going to be really engaging. I don't think it's going to be anything fascinating or interesting. It might have some gimmick, sure, but as I've listed, if this job listing it was actually correct and they did not delete because it was not, if they deleted this because it was incorrect, I mean, sure, whatever. But if they delete this because people's gonna start reading it too much and actually reveal something about the game, I kind of believe that too. But reading this, assuming this is not a mistake and they removed it because people were reading it too much, I think it's gonna be that's how it sounds. It's gonna be semi-open world like Battlefield 1. Or Modern Warfare 2019 single co-op missions. It's gonna be the same thing. It's gonna be bare bones. It's gonna be very simple and all that kind of stuff. And I don't know. Like, I was really looking forward to Battlefield single player, believe it or not, because I'm really into that, like, universe building and all that kind of stuff. Like I said, me and Ray been talking about it for like more than a decade about the Battlefield universe. And they're only now realizing, like, hey, we should do that. Yeah, no shit, you should be doing that. But Call of Duty already did that. So whatever you're going to be doing now is going to feel like a copy-paste or inspired by Call of Duty. No, of course they're going to have a Battle Royale, they're going to have a single player, they're going to have a multiplayer. So yeah, it's like you open the game, the next Battlefield game, you're going to have 3 squares to choose from. You have your single player, you have your multiplayer, and you have your Battle Royale. That's going to be how the game is going to work. And people are going to look, oh, this is like exactly like Call of Duty. This is exactly like Warzone. This is like exactly Call of Duty HQ. Exactly the same thing. And that's the shitty part. People are going to compare it because it's going to be the same thing. But anyway, going back on the single player, I don't think it's going to be good. I think it's going to be bare bones. From what it seems, it's like, if this job listing was correct, it sounds exactly like I predicted. It's gonna be like you spawn the open map, big battlefield map. You have 2 objectives. Do it your own way. Oh, then gonna say you can do it stealthily. You can go loud. Of course, everyone's gonna go loud because we all had that experience. We know how these single player games work. It's really hard to make a first-person single player game interesting these days, and I fully get that. So that's why story and somewhat cinematic moments are important. Otherwise, you don't really care. You want to be engaged with the characters, and if you can't really engage with the characters or whatever the case may be, it's gonna be rough. And I'm not expecting good positive reviews coming from that Battlefield single player in the future. I'm not. Let's see if I'm wrong. I hope I'm wrong, but I don't think I am. Because I mean, you when it comes to my personal suspicion and experience with stuff like that, it's like when you see like loads of red flags or certain so-called notes or whatever, like small details, small clues, and then you start piecing everything together, like, it's not a full picture, but you get some sort of idea what to expect, and I'm usually really good at that. So I'm expecting, it's gonna be nothing interesting. it's just not. And it pisses me off that they actually closed Regional Studios. It's a studio that was meant to make a Battlefield single player with good characters and all that kind of stuff. And you literally had a person that made Halo, created Master Chief, and he left EA with such a bad taste in his mouth. Like he just angry at EA. The creator of Halo is angry at EA for not let him do whatever he wants, not give him the tools or the opportunity to make that Battlefield single player or Battlefield universe. He was supposed to be the Kevin Feige. What was his name? Marcus Leto. Yeah, he was supposed to be the Kevin Feige of Battlefield, and they fucked up. They closed the studio and fired people, and of course they put some people, on other teams and everything to work on the single player game. But it's not gonna be good. It's just. Everything is just, it makes me bloody angry. Makes me really angry, and I hate that. But yeah, anyway, so we'll see how it goes. And if you want to hear my rants about the Battlefield single player, you should go to the episode where I talk about the closure of Retrospective Studios. I can't remember which episode was it, but it was like 13, 14 maybe. But yeah, I think it's one of the best episodes I ever did by myself, because it was just like, I went full on rant about all of this, because I just do not understand what they're smoking at EA. And yeah, I was really angry about that. So we'll see how the single player is. Regarding everything else, anything else to talk about Battlefield? No, not really. That's kind of it. That's all I have in my notes. There wasn't much to talk, and I'm kind of amazed I even managed to talk for an hour. And next episode, I'm gonna have Ray on for obvious reasons. I'm not gonna be by myself this time, but I think it was a perfect chance just to have a really casual thing to talk about, something casual about Battlefield, about me playing Battlefield 1, the Patreon changes, all that kind of stuff. That's great. What are the future plans for the Battlefield 1 podcast? They're still kind of the same. Still a monthly episode. We'll do 2 episodes this month because we missed one last month for the first time. We missed a monthly episode, but that's mostly because if you check my Patreon, I always do monthly updates, and I explained in the updates there will be a very quiet month because I'm traveling. I'm gonna be on holiday and all that kind of stuff, so I won't be able to record any Battlefield 1 podcast and so on. So I did say that we might miss a deadline, so we did. I'm so sorry. So yeah, I recommend you to join our Patreon, even as a free member. As a free member, you can join as a free member and just get all the updates, what's happening with the podcast, with the channel, and all that kind of stuff. So I recommend to join our Patreon just because of that, just for the updates alone. And if you really feel like, listening to our exclusive, amazing podcast, that we have on Patreon, like Live Gaming Gathering podcast, you should subscribe and listen to us, because we have some really amazing conversations there and really fun conversations about basically everything regarding gaming. All the video games we play and so on. I think we make amazing podcasts. But yeah, that's kind of it. So thank you guys for listening. Thank you for engaging with us. Thank you for listening to my ramblings. Like I said at the start of the show, leave a rating, follow us, check out Patreon, patreon.com/TheLankySoldier. Join as a free member at least, to be updated and everything. And because even free members are getting loads of content there. Yeah, support the show. Thank you for listening. And yeah, that's kind of it. So thank you guys for everything. My name is Tom, also known as the Lanky Soldier. And I'll see you in the next episode. See ya.